Good evening, everyone. My name is Miles Thurlow, and I'm the co-founder of Workplace Foundation, which is a charity set up by Workplace Gallery to support emerging and underrepresented artists based in the north of England. This week, artist Nina Chua will be talking about her work with producer and curator Kwong Lee. Nina Chua makes drawings that are determined by the capacities and constraints of the materials and tools that she uses. Since 2011, she has predominantly been working with marker pen on paper. Each series of drawings explores a different nuance in the process. For example, the amount of ink on in a marker pen, the permeability of cheap A4, or the resilience of paper pulled from a roll. The drawings are abstract, dealing with line, colour and form. They are often made up of straight lines or scribbles drawn repeatedly to cover the surface of the paper. Marker pen is an unforgiving medium and marks cannot be erased or reworked. Every slip of the hand and lapse of control is visible, and the process of its making is fully revealed in the drawing. The transparency of the visual information and the accumulative quality of the marks convey a sense of time spent through the gradual application of line after line. Nina Chua was born in 1980 in Manchester, UK. She graduated from an MA in Fine Art in Manchester School of Art in 2011. She lives and works in Manchester. Recent exhibitions include Everything Must Go Part 2 at Workplace Foundation, and a 123 Castlefield Gallery Manchester, 1117 CBS Gallery Liverpool, Life and Opinions Tanya Leighton Berlin, From A to C, This Being B, Caustic Coastal Manchester. Nina is was part of the 2016 Liverpool Biennale Associate Artist Programme and has worked in the Whitworth Art Gallery Collection, Manchester. Kwong Lee works as a producer for Manchester International Festival. Between 2005 and 2016, he was the director of Castlefield Venue, an artist development agency. His freelance work has been with universities, artist groups, and individual artists. From 2013 to 2016, Lee co-chaired Contemporary Visual Arts Manchester, part of a national network consisting of organisations, arts professionals, and artists that promotes and supports the work of the city's regions visual art ecosystem. He is on the board of the Centre for Chinese Contemporary Art. Lee has lectured and taught in a number of universities. He has presented at conferences, seminars, and symposia, and has enjoyed chairing discussions on contemporary art practice. As an artist, he has exhibited in the UK at the Whitworth and Manchester Art Gallery, nationally, and in Hong Kong and Japan. So, as usual, we'll try and make time for questions. If you can make use of the Q&A function on Zoom, if you're part of the webinar, then I'll try and interrupt Nina and Kwong at the end. And here I am now going to welcome. Okay, I'm going to welcome Nina. Nina, are you there? Hello, Nina.
Hello.
And Kwong. You should be here. Hello.
Hi.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So, as usual, I'm going to disappear into the background, and I will be in charge of images. So please do order me around. Tell me, to scroll to the next next piece or whatever. Over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miles. So good to have this opportunity to have a chat with you, Nina, and thanks, Miles, for the opportunity. So, Nina,
yes,
I've worked with you over many years, but mostly at my time at Castlefield Gallery in Manchester. But more recently, we've been sort of fellow studio holders at Paradise Works in Salford, where you are still working from, and I've left and not been in the studio. I've really sort of observed your work from your sort of MA days at Manchester School of Art to now, really, and it's really evolved, and it's really, I would say, I'd be interested. My observation is that your work has kind of developed into expanded drawing, painting practice kind of thing. And as Miles said in the introduction, a lot of your work is kind of process and is using material. So I want to start with asking you about your kind of relationship to material and materiality, because you've been working with paper and marker pens for many years. Could you sort of tell us a bit more about how you got into working with those particular medium? yeah, and what attracts you to it, and how you find working with, you know, your strict set of rules, which is, you know, those marker pens and the paper.
Yeah, I'll try. I suppose firstly, even though I do work within the like capacities and constraints of the medium and the tools, I don't think there's any set rules. So, you know, the work is quite restless and moves around quite a lot, even within the you know, even just using the paper and the marker pens. I suppose just going back to when I first started using marker pen on paper, it was purely because I liked the I just liked what it did on the paper. So there's something about the marker pen that just really kind of the boldness of the color, how it could saturate. That was a really important thing, because it really, right from the start, I was working on both sides of the paper, treating the paper not just as a surface to be drawn on, but as a thing in itself, as an object. So I was really, you know, drawing on one side and turning it over and seeing what the mark did, and the marker pen really saturated through. And then I think that's what drew me to it first and foremost. And yeah, it's really just gone from there.
You mentioned surfaces. Sorry, you carry on.
No, say.
Well, I was going to. You mentioned about the surfaces, and you started working on both sides, and I think on the visit to your studio just recently, I kind of realized that, you know, you also did that with very large pieces of paper.
Yes.
So that kind of using the surfaces, not only as surfaces but as an object. The kind of the paper, how you treat that as an object, that it's not flat surface. It's not you're not layering things on top of each other that is hiding, you know, like some paint you can hide a mark by painting over, but with your marker pens, is it right to say that you can't really hide?
No,
it's layering in a very translucent kind of way.
It is, yeah. It's very difficult to, you know, it's not like a wet medium like paint is, so you can't paint over, blur or disguise what you do. It's so yeah, every mark is visible, and I suppose another thing I like about the marker pen and the paper is that they're just very, very readily available, and it's that kind of immediacy, you know. Just, I think that's what I like about drawing as well, is just, you know, it's easy to get hold of the materials and just make a mark, and just just spontaneously and in that moment, and very quickly. Yeah.
And I guess what strikes me as well, when we look at your work, is that how you transform the material. I know many artists, you know, use this phrase transforming, you know, from one material to another. I mean, your work is very much process driven. I don't want to, you know, I'm being quite careful with my words, because I think, like you were saying earlier, it's kind of restless. You don't want to be kind of fixed on a system. I think you're very fluid in that way. But what strikes me about your work is that you work right to the edge of the paper. In fact, beyond the edge, round the back of papers. And so, you know, hence the sometimes double-sided, sometimes single-sided. But the totality of that is quite interesting. And you mentioned something to me recently about, just remind me that actually your connection with fabric and textiles. Do you want to sort of go into that a little bit? Because, you know, in a way, you can kind of have that, you can think of that reference really as a viewer. You can really think of fabrics.
Yeah. Well, before I studied fine art, I studied embroidery, and when it was a great course. I really loved it. It really was the start of me drawing, and there was a strong emphasis on mark making in that course. So that really was the start for me. But then I think with a piece of cloth, you've always got this sense that it can be shaped. It's either going to go, it's usually going to be turned into something that's like fits the body, or fits an interior, or I think one of my teachers used to say, people that are into textiles always like the back more than the front. And there was this, and there's this sort of motion, with the needle. You can draw a line with a needle, but you're puncturing the material, you're puncturing that flat material and moving from one side to another. So you're constantly turning it. And I think that just, even though I did for a long time try to move away from my textile background, it just comes through in the work. It's just there in the way that I handle materials. It's there in the way that I think. It's very deeply embedded, I think. And even going right back to my childhood, my grandma was somebody that liked to craft, so she was always knitting and sewing, and I picked up a lot from that. So I think it's just very deeply embedded, and in the sort of way that I think. So I think that comes through in the drawings, like how I treat the drawings, and looking at both sides, and thinking about the pen really penetrating through the material, and that sort of fusing of the paper and the pen,
And just to follow up on that, really, of course, your work is non-representational. It doesn't, even though I mentioned the fabric kind of textiles relationship, it's not, it's very obvious you're not trying to replicate something. You're not trying to represent an object. It is an object in itself that you're working with, the paper, the pen. But I kind of wonder, more and more your work has been, from your straight lines, your earlier work where you would draw hundreds and hundreds of straight lines with or lines with a straight edge. But obviously we can still see the action of the artist, i.e. you, and your hand gestures, maybe from left to right or right to left, whichever way, one may read it. But your recent work has kind of got more kind of fluid in a way of different freehand lines.
Yes.
I want to ask you, how important is mark making in your work, as in, and showing the mark making in your work? Is it part of the process, or is it important to show those? When
I first started making the marker pen, the drawings with the marker pen, I was using a ruler, and in a way I was trying to escape any gestural mark by using a ruler, a 30-centimeter ruler, and just making straight lines. I was trying to sort of move away from any expressive or gestural mark, just to really bring it back to the paper and the pen, and just to see what it could do. And then I've been making these drawings for nearly 10 years now, and so, like I said, kind of things change and shift, and the drawings have their own sort of rhythm, and they suggest things to me, and it's just moved. And sometimes as well, I feel like once I've been doing something for a while, like I say straight lines, I just need to do the complete opposite. I just really need to shake it up, and partly for my own sanity, and for my own for the challenge, and you know, to keep the work moving forward, because I don't want to keep repeating the same things, you know, which is one of the difficulties in a kind of the type of work I make, is keeping it moving forward and keeping it from becoming stale. So, you know, sometimes yeah, I will just whatever I've been doing, I'll just stop and do the complete opposite. So, you know, from making straight lines to making much more fluid, you could say, you know, expressive lines. And there was also something as well where at a certain point, the drawings were getting bigger, and I just became much more aware of the physicality of the drawings and the paper, and also of my own movements. So that was then something that I became quite interested in, you know, like using the full sort of stretch of my arm, the full, you know, and just thinking about the drawings on a different scale, sort of on maybe like a sort of human scale, my scale. And now, you know, I'm thinking of the drawings even on a bigger scale. So just, yeah.
I think that's really interesting, because I picked that up because I did the fine art course where I did painting, and I'm always when I look at art, particularly kind of 2D or so-called 2D art, I always look at surfaces and kind of mark making within a drawing or painting, and I could really see the action of you within the work, even though
Yeah.
it's non-representational, and that's really understood, but nevertheless that kind of relationship the objects, the work has with the artist is really interesting. I find that, you know, like you say, that the scale of it is kind of human, your size, and you're
Yeah.
thinking about bigger, and I kind of wonder, even your smaller work on A4 paper,
Yeah.
you know, they also give a kind of imprint of your movement, in a sense, kind of thing.
Yeah, they do.
But which brings me on to that kind of, you know, you also said when you're making work, sometimes you would turn the paper, you know, in the studio, you would quite naturally just, maybe
Yeah.
there's a sense that you want to disrupt your processes, that saying
Yeah.
what what you're saying
Yeah.
earlier. You want to
Yeah.
turn it upside down, or different ways. Can you do?
Yeah.
Do you want to explain a bit more about that? How, you know, when do you decide that to happen, kind of thing?
Yeah. I don't know when I decide. It can be quite spontaneous that or, you know, sometimes the drawing has just come to a stopping point and I need to look at it from a different angle. But there's always just, the only thing that I want really from each drawing is that it surprises me. And so I want to move away from any sort of preconceived notion I have of the drawing, or any preempting what it might be. And so I, you know, whatever, I sometimes, you know, can get, you know, part way through a drawing and just take it off the wall, turn it upside down or turn it the other way. And that, you know, will happen usually quite a few times. And it just helps, yeah, it just kind of helps me to get away from anything I might be doing that's shaping it in a certain, you know, shaping it in a certain way. And, you know, maybe, yeah, again, it makes it more difficult, you know, it's just, it's sort of, it disrupts it. That's just the easiest way to put it. It just disrupts the process. And
it does really come through, because I think when I look at your work, I get this kind of, especially the size are not uniform. I mean, actually, the scale of your paper has always been an interesting thing, because I know that from the pre-cut paper that you have used, you kind of are using a roll paper that you cut freehand, so hence the kind of more kind of natural, shall we say, edges that you get, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Is that right? That you kind of
yeah, I just cut it from a roll, and again, it's because I like this. It's an immediate thing. I don't, you know, mark it out. I just go for it. I just cut it and then, you know, pin it on the wall and make a mark, and it's that's quite quick. You know, I don't deliberate over it, and I don't sketch anything out, and I try not to come up with too many ideas before I start. I just that cut edge sometimes a bit wobbly because I've just pulled the paper off the roll and just cut it with a Stanley knife or a pair of scissors, just you know, as just very quickly.
And the way that you work, the way that you kind of work means that actually the edges are not edges at all. I think they're quite expansive, as in, you know, I could imagine the marks kind of going beyond the paper, or what I'm trying to say is that I feel that the edges of the paper, the surface, doesn't kind of contain the lines and the marks and the color that they are imbued. I don't know if that's an effect that's the reading that you kind of like people to get away from the illusion of there's a piece of paper here, kind of thing, is an object.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I've thought of it exactly like that, but I mean, the paper has a sort of natural spring to it, and it sometimes springs back to reveal the other side. And I think I was been interested in this idea that you know, the drawing not just as a surface, as a thing, and also something, you know, where you might not necessarily see all of it. So it's something that I sometimes think of as like the private life of the drawing. You know, it's something that it retains for itself. And it might, like in this one on the screen at the moment, you know, you get a sort of glimpse of what's on the other side, but you can never really, you will never see the other side. So it's this sense that it's more than just a surface, although there's nothing wrong with being a surface, but yeah, there's just I don't know if that answers your question, but
it does. I'm kind of still fixated on the idea of a piece of paper, an artwork as its own object, as opposed to as a piece of paper, kind of thing. So it kind of is completely, they're so holistic in that way. And the other thing I was going to say is that even the scale of the work, I feel like I can dive in. I feel like I mentioned to you the other day when I was at the studio, I feel like sometimes I want to see them as a very small kind of point of view, as in, you know, as an insect looking at your work, or see them or project them up really big. I mean, not to change them, but they're so, there's a macro micro kind of way of looking at them. So even though on one hand they're kind of that human scale, but on the other hand, because of the fine mark making and the what it does to me is that I can't fixate on the scale once I'm there, which is really, really interesting to me, kind of thing. Do you get lost in your own work in that sense?
Sometimes, yeah, because I even sometimes work on it rolled up, so I can't see the whole thing, and I will move into it and work on sort of areas of it and then step away from it. I think because even on the very big drawings, I use you know, I don't I don't really scale up the pen, you know, I just use usually the fine marker pens. So there is this kind of, you know, in order to cover the surface, there's this sort of depth of marks. And yeah, sometimes, especially maybe with the A4 drawings where the saturation occurs, when I look at them, sometimes I feel like I can see the fibers of the paper, that I kind of get pulled like into the work. And the same thing happens sometimes if when there's just a lot of marks, like this drawing that's on the screen now, there's so many tiny marks, and then there's bigger, more almost like more calligraphic marks on the top of it. And so I think I can tune into certain areas and look at them, and then zoom back out and look at the whole thing. So yeah, I mean,
sorry, you carry on.
No, I've lost the thread.
Okay. No, I think that I got really lost in the minutiae, and then imagining myself looking in a different point of view in them, and that's really intriguing for essentially a kind of quite a flat kind of thing, you know. You mentioned something earlier which I wanted to explore a bit more, is that you said you sometimes work on the roll, and I think rather than a piece of paper pinned onto a wall. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit? You know, when you say a roll, is it a roll of sort of paper that you know, a drawing paper that you have?
Yeah, it might be something that's been on the wall and I've already worked on, and I've then taken it off the wall, because sometimes, again, to distance, you know, to get away from any ideas that I have about the drawing and what it might become, I take it off the wall and then store it in a rolled form. And sometimes I'll just, you know, I'll just have it in the studio, and it might be sat there for months and months and months, and then I'll just make some marks on it as it's rolled up. There's just, there's something I just tune into something on that, you know, on that at that particular time, and just kind of go for it. And and so it could be like, often will be, the ones I work on rolled up will be like maybe 3-4 meters in width, and then they'll roll up into, you know, a sort of roll of maybe about 30 centimeters diameter. So there's quite a sort of circumference like that I can work on, you know, and there's quite a lot of space I can work on even as it's rolled up. And it's, again, it's just another way of disrupting my thoughts and ideas about it, and then, you know, I'll unroll it, put it back on the wall, and just see what those marks have done, and see, you know, it's sort of shifted the like what the drawing might be, or, you know, and sometimes it's kind of pushed it somewhere which is, you know, I might think is not particularly good, but I would, you know, try to see what can happen with it.
I think that's really, in a way, kind of quite obviously the intuition, but also knowing kind of the risk. And, well, risk is probably the not the right word here, but that kind of play and pushing the medium further, which leads me to some other works I saw recently, which of yours, which is the floor pieces that I saw, which were really intriguing, in that, you know, because I saw them on the floor. I think I asked you whether you work with it on the wall or on the floor, how, you know, because they were so, I mean, they because they were very 3D. Do you want to sort of say anything more about how you develop this series of work?
Yeah, I can. I mean, first of all, work on them on both sides. So usually quite large piece of paper, many meters. And then I really just cover the surface. And it's even if I look at it and it's a good drawing, I don't want the ones that are scrunched up like this to be the sort of reject flat drawings. These are like, they've got some interesting quality in, as a drawing that would be shown on the wall. But then there's this kind of, I'll take it off the wall and just scrunch it, just like use sort of, just scrunch it up. And sometimes it's like takes quite a lot of pressure, really compress it, really kind of try to just really squash it down. And then just the paper with it has this, it expands back out again and kind of finds its own form. And I think there's something in this, just the time it takes to apply the marker pen on both sides, that very long process. And then the scrunching process, which is really quick and quite brutal and physical as well. And there was just something in it for me, something that, because I sort of form a sort of relationship with these things, and then just somehow just crushing it just seemed like such a brutal thing to do. And I sometimes look at them and they sort of, well, for me, they become these sort of damaged things, these like broken things. And there's something, I think, that just another element to the work. It just adds something to it.
They again remind me of they kind of become their own thing. It feels like they are kind of so almost like kind of futuristic. When I saw them, I kind of, it sprung to mind that they could be 3D printed, or they could be a something that's designed to look like handmade in a way. There's this kind of what I'm trying to say is that in the context of now, it feels like they transform from being an object to something that could be a digital object kind of thing almost. And that might be my own interpretation, because they were so fresh. I hadn't seen that series of work, and they were so big kind of thing that I could once again I could see the relationship that of the artist's kind of hand or physical kind of relationship to it kind of thing. So you're saying that it springs back sometimes. So
yeah, it's, I really compress it with all my strength, and then it just sort of springs back. And sometimes it, with some of them, I've really gone in and compressed them many times, and then they really become, the paper gets sort of bruised, like marked, and then it loses its flexibility, it loses its spring, it sort of, and it becomes this sort of floppy thing. But I think, it's something for me about it really brings to the fore the sort of physicality of the paper, and the nature of the paper, and again, moving away from the paper just as a surface to be worked on. It's like, really, instead it becomes very much just part of the drawing, and it just.
I think I was curious to ask you last time about how you want them displayed, and obviously in some of the slides that Miles is scrolling through, some of those scrunch, the large scrunch up works, some of them are on the floor, display on the floor, and some of them on plinths kind of thing. Is that how you intend to show these particular works kind of thing? Are they floor pieces, as it were?
I think so. I think most of them are floor pieces because this hovering over them, again, it's just that viewpoint, sort of being over it. It's I think it just brings to mind certain things. I think it just somehow works if they're on the floor and you look at them from above. But then this one that was on the plinth, it just somehow found a home that on a plinth. I don't know why that one should be on a plinth, but I get it just goes back to that thing of there are no kind of rules and regulations, and if I think I'm starting to make rules, I try and break them just to
yeah. No, that's coming across really clear actually, because I think that live decision making that you as an artist you make, even when the work is done, and the way you display it, or the way you present it kind of thing. And I noticed that a lot of your work, the wall-based work, are kind of just pinned, sometimes just pinned to the wall. So it's not hiding the fixtures in a sense, because if you go up close you can see the pins, and you can see some of the holes where you've used pins previously, for example. But the curls and the natural shape of the drawing kind of is there on display in a sense. I was going to ask you about the question about how the wall-based work, is that the way you would ideally display them? Do you see them framed sometimes? What's your relationship with framing it, kind of thing?
Yeah, I really don't like the drawings framed, and I know sometimes just for practical reasons they have to be framed, but I really feel like it just traps them, it really kind of just contains them too much.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I really ideally, if practicalities didn't need to be considered, it would just be 2 small pins in the top corner, like, of the drawing, and that works for the big ones as well. And then you've got this sense of it sort of being more free in a way, not being contained too much.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense actually. Even the framing now with the slides kind of gives it the edges that it needs to be free in a sense, kind of thing. I think another question, which is maybe a silly question really, kind of, which I need to ask, I feel like. So I want to know how you start your work, with a blank piece of paper, and how do you finish your work? When do you know your work's finished, kind of thing? It's a silly question, but I think it's
no, it's not silly at all. It's like these questions are sort of eternally perplexing to me, and then the starting the work, it's just one of the tricky things is when you're confronted with a white space, and what do you draw? What do you do? And it's just, no matter how many drawings I make, I always, I often think, now what do I do now? And I'll just sit there and look at the surface of the paper, and I don't know what to do. I don't know how to start, and I don't really want to know how to start. It's just something, each one is different. Sometimes there's like a sort of trigger point. It's like a little spark, Sometimes even just going through the motions and just you know, just applying a mark, but it's just yeah, I think it is a really interesting question about how to start, and yeah, I don't know if I know how to do it, you know. I suppose you just start by putting a mark, and then well, I do, and then seeing where it goes, but you know, like I said, each one is slightly different, so there isn't really a set starting point for me.
Yeah,
and
that's
then
clear.
and then when to finish, that again is just varies from drawing to drawing, and sometimes because sometimes it's within the logic of the drawing, because I don't reject the logic, you know, in it. There's some drawings, you know, there is a sort of sense of I want to get from A to B, you know, maybe like from one side of the paper to the other, or I want to completely cover the front and back. So then that's within the logic of the paper, and sometimes, you know, I'll use a marker pen until it runs out, so that's in the kind of logic of it as well, you know, until the marker pen dies. And then other times they just stop. When they stop, just, you know, I spend a lot of time in my studio just looking at things, looking at the work on the wall, and just sometimes I come into my studio in the morning and it's fresh eyes, and just something about that drawing will just strike me, something that didn't strike me the day before, and that, you know, that sometimes suggests to me, okay, you can just stop now. And then at the moment I've kind of been disregarding that moment, and it's, you know, just saying, okay, you think you can stop now, this drawing is actually doing something, but you're not, you know, just keep going with it, keep going, keep pushing it, add something else on top of it, disrupt it, you know, absolutely just ruin it, basically. Just keep going and see if you can get to another point with it. So yeah, the stopping point again is different in as well, and these are the things, like even within the marker pen and paper that I've worked with for so long, I just keep finding these different things, just that kind of just to keep it going and keep it yeah, just you know, keep it from becoming too rigid, or too you know, too much of any one thing.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, because I was thinking, you know, how, because you have certain processes, but you also break your, you know, you don't want to get into fixated with certain rules kind of thing, and then actually that must make it very difficult, so to know when to stop. But then that's I guess that's the dilemma for many artists who make work that is not a I guess that's the dilemma for many artists. I'll leave it there, actually, because that is, I've known that a little bit as well, but that's why I thought it was a silly question. But nevertheless, it's so intriguing, because, you know, sometimes I can imagine you may do something that you think, oh, I maybe shouldn't have done that, or, you know, or maybe that's, do you ever push your work over the edge that becomes like you can't, you know, that you know, is ruined in a sense, or you can't use it anymore?
Yes. I don't know, I can't really identify when it is or what that point is, but yeah, sometimes I do. Not all of them work out, you know, not all of them are good enough, and sometimes I can't go any further with it, I can't do anything with it, but it's really, really difficult for me to pin down what it is that you know, makes me think that. But then even then I don't really throw them away, I roll them up, and then at a later date I get them out and see if my thinking, my feelings towards that thing have changed, if it suggests something else to me, because I think often it is about getting away from, you know, what I want it to do, or what I you know, think about it, and yeah, and then sometimes I do just take one out after many months or many years, and it will suddenly that sort of a spark will strike, and I'll just be able to do something with it, but not always. Some of them go in the bin.
Yeah.
Not many, but
Yeah.
some of them do. Yeah.
It just reminds me that it's a kind of lifelong kind of process in a sense. You know, things marks that you may have made months ago or years ago has a different context depending on your where you are in the moment, in a sense, kind of thing. What I'm trying to say is that, you know, rather than having a finish point, that's why I'm trying to get at, I suppose. You know, same way that I see some of the work as expanding from the edges, they don't really end. The work in terms of timeline also may not end as well, because, you know, once you see certain ways of reading your work that I see, it can kind of continue in your mind as well. I'm not explaining this properly, but I think what's really intriguing about your work is that it seems to be kind of a bit timeless in the way that it suggests timeline as not a fixed thing, in as much as the edges are not a fixed thing, kind of thing. So that's the association I want to get.
Yeah, I think that's interesting for me to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, just I think they are a bit like restless, difficult things to pin down, and I mean, you know, sometimes I think what sometimes I look for is like something at the same time it's coming together, it's falling apart as well. Especially in the most recent work, you know, there's a sort of hint of something emerging from this sort of mass of lines, something that your eye maybe can tune into, but then it just disintegrates again. So yeah, this sort of, yeah, this what you said makes sense to me, you know.
Yeah, I'm saying that as an experience, really. Yeah, no, it's always fascinating to me about how something, I understand what it is, this lines on paper, but it has that kind of depth, and it plays around with the time, the kind of non-linear reading of something.
I think because I also, just in a sort of simple way, because you can see every mark on the paper, there's this sense of it almost being like a tally or something, like, you know, every mark is kind of a sort of marker of that moment, and then that accumulates and it gets entangled and knotted up, and you can't follow the you know, you lose the line in the other lines. So there's this maybe like sense of, yeah, that sort of this sort of tally kind of going wrong, or, you know, yeah, just something like that.
Yeah, no, I just find them, you know, it's like when you read something or watch something, that kind of timelessness is somehow I get very drawn to in your work. Miles, we're 10 to now. Do we want to go sort of more into questions? I've got other prompts and stuff, but
hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Brilliant. That was great. Thank you so much for that. I've got a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Is the work sculpture or is it painting?
Well, I would say drawing. So neither. But yeah, I suppose these things are, you know, the parameters, these definitions are always you know, it's always like grey areas, but I really think of it as drawing. Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about colour and how you choose colour? Because it seems that there are very specific decisions going on here.
I'm not sure. I mean, I think that is really intuitive with me. I mean, I use Sharpie marker pens, so, you know, the colour palette is like predetermined, and there is a sort of certain amount of colour mixing, and also with the bleed through, you know, but yeah, it's a very intuitive thing. I don't really think about colour theory. It's and sometimes it can be just the practical sense of what's available to me at that time. Things like going through the pen box and picking out the, you know, the ones that are still working, things like that. That all comes into the work, and then somehow shapes it again, moving away from like my conscious decisions about what it might be, or the sort of ideas I have about it. It's the colour is just yeah, yeah, don't think about the theory of it too much at all.
I have a question which is from me really, and we've talked about this a little bit before, and it's a bit about vocation, and kind of expanding a little bit upon what Kwong was saying about time and the sort of works expanding in time beyond themselves. And I was really interested in the idea that actually that this work in itself is an ongoing vocation, and you're kind of drawn to it. You're kind of, you know, this is a practice that I feel is ongoing, and it sort of taps into nursing, because I knew you were a nurse, but I forgot about it, and then I
Miles, you've broken up, so I've missed that end bit.
Can you hear me?
I can
okay?
now, yeah.
Am I back?
Hear you now. Yeah, you're back.
I'm talking too quickly, I think. It shuts down. When I knew you were a nurse, but I'd forgotten. And when lockdown started, I got in touch with a number of artists just to sort of check in and see how things were. And you kind of got back with this amazing and almost heartbreaking sort of response about your experience as a nurse. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about that, if possible, you know, just your experiences really of being an artist and being a nurse at this time.
Well, I think I'm still trying to make sense of it. I found it a little bit difficult. Well, if I go back to the start of lockdown, then at first I was just really happy to have a job and was just getting on with it really, and just hadn't really had much time to reflect on it. And then, you know, the sort of sense of camaraderie and the public support was really good. And then as things have progressed, it's been really chaotic at times. It's really, really sad to see the patients not being able to have family visits, and that's just, it's really just, you know, sometimes they're going through very difficult things, and you know, without the support of their family. So that's been really sad to watch. And you know, I think, yeah, it's just, and I think it's, and then there's a lot of changes at the hospital, lots of people that have been moved, like wards that have closed down, staff displaced, and these things just have, you know, they just sort of impact on your resilience, I think. And then for me, I've watched a lot of my colleagues, they've got coronavirus. I got coronavirus. I've passed it to my mum, who was really quite ill, had to go to hospital, and she's still recovering now. So you just have this sort of, it's just, I think it's just really been a sort of a strange and emotional and difficult time. I mean, that's my experience, because there's a lot of people in the hospital that maybe their workload has been just the same or even slightly less than usual, because there's not as many people in the hospital. So on a day-to-day basis, you can have good shifts, but then there's a lot of disruption, a lot of change, and I think that there's kind of just a underlying, all these things just impacting on you just a little bit, and really strange time.
Are you able to make work at all in this time?
Yes, yeah. I mean, my studio was closed at first, and I really missed going into the studio. And then as soon as I could, I just got straight back in the studio, because I think it's just, for me, I feel like the pull of the work, like the work sort of calls me to make it. And if I don't want to leave too big a gap, I don't, and I want to get back to it, because I think you can just lose the momentum or the thread of it, or it's something for me that I like to do as much as possible. So when I'm not at the hospital, just go into the studio, and even just sometimes, not always productive time, it's sometimes just procrastinating or just looking at things, not always making drawings, but it is really important to me to go in and make them, and give it the time and space that it needs.
Well, that's a beautiful answer to my question. I don't have any more. Kwong, did you have something? I saw something pinging up, but I'm not sure I got it.
There's a few things on the webinar chat, and
there are. Oh my gosh! Yeah.
Shall we go to those? This might lead on, if I may, Miles. This may lead on, and I think it was before you said you explained your nursing role, but Mike says, how beautiful the work is, but are the drawings in any way cathartic, he asks?
I don't know. I think maybe a little bit, and there is something therapeutic about going into the studio, but it's not the reason I make them at all. I don't make it as a kind of form of therapy. It's first and foremost, I make them as drawings, for other people, because I think you always make them with a, with in mind sharing them with an audience. So yeah, there is an element maybe of it, but I think it's not the foremost thing.
There's a question here. Do you always know which is the front side, or is this also part of the restlessness of the drawings? Does the front and back change as you are making the work? Yeah,
it does. But then there's always a side that it just seems to settle on that side. It just seems to be. There's some drawings that it could visually it could be either side. Both sides are interesting as a drawing, but there's just often just it settles in one particular way, and then that becomes what it is.
Sandra asks, do you use both hands, Nina?
Oh, not really.
Then she goes on to ask, or have you used any extensions on your body as drawing tools as well?
No, no, not yet. No. Maybe in the future.
Never say no, right? Never say never.
I think we are at 9 o'clock. Has anybody got any other questions at all? No, I think we're done. So thank you both so much. Thank you, Nina, for your beautiful and arresting work. It's a real joy. It's a real joy just to look at it, to be honest. And thank you so much, Kwong, for your brilliant questions. You know, I really enjoyed listening to you both.
A pleasure.
Thank you.
As usual, it's been a really lovely evening, and you know, thank you everybody, all those people that have joined us. It's great to have such a strong audience, and you know, all your questions and everything. We are going to be taking a little bit of a break. I'm going to take a bit of a holiday for a couple of weeks. So
well-deserved holiday.
Yeah. And I will be in touch with you through the usual channels when we get back with our next conversation. I think this is something we want to keep going throughout. So thanks everyone.
Thank you.
I'll say goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
I try and find the leave button. Where is it? Oh. Right, here we go. End meeting. Okay. Bye everyone.
Bye.
Bye.